It can be a bit long-winded, but I praise God for the opportunity I've had to come today. It's been really a blessing to me, and especially to for each and every one of us to understand more about the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel. So now the next time we read this in our own personal study, we'll have a very good understanding of what's actually taking place, things we usually probably skip over. If you have your Bibles, turn to me to 2nd Samuel chapter 15. Just picking up from where we left off in the last one. 2nd Samuel chapter 15 and verse 1. Now it came about after this that Absalom provided for himself a chariot and horses and 50 men as runners before him. Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. And when any man had a suit, that means a lawsuit, would come to the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" Then they would say, "Well, your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." And Absalom would say to him, "See, your claims are good and right." But no man listens to you on part of the king. Moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, that one would appoint me judge in the land. And every man who has a suit or a cause would come to me, and I would give him justice." Then when a man came near to prostrate himself before him, he would take out his hand and take a hold of him, and he would kiss him. In this manner, Absalom dealt with all of Israel, who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole away the hearts of the men of Israel. When we look at the life and reign of King David, I think it's safe to say already that it's nothing short of a soap opera. In the Bible, there's over 62 chapters written about David's life, and each and every story is always extremely eventful. As we come to these chapters now, we're coming to the end of King David's reign as a king in the twilight of his life. Although David had lived a very adventurous life and he had a great deal of famous victories, on the other side of the coin, he also had a great deal of famous failures. And like we learned in the last meeting, I think his greatest failure probably came in his parenting skills and how he acted as a father. But at this point, we're now going into the final phase of this fourfold judgment, the judgment that was pronounced by Nathan the prophet because of his sin with Bathsheba. Already at this point, 2 of his children are dead, 1 has been violated, and the last one, who is the main focus of our text tonight, has not only committed murder, as we'll see, but he's been completely consumed by murderous ambitions and intentions. So now we're going to study the character of Absalom. We're going to look at his ultimate act of treachery against his own father for the purpose of his own gain. I think one thing that's very easy to conclude about Absalom's character is that by his nature, he is a very deep, very calculating and very treacherous man. He's a very, very unforgiving man. He's deceitful, he's violent, and he's also extremely proud. He's a very popular man. But there's something else very noticeable about Absalom, and for me, I probably think he's probably his scariest attribute. Absalom is extremely patient. He is extremely patient. He's a very ambitious man. He knows exactly what he wants in life, and he's going to go to any means to get it. He doesn't mind having to wait. He's like a lion who hides himself in the grass. He's a man who will bide his time and wait for the right opportunity to attack. This man, he bit his tongue for 2 whole years, and he watched and he waited for his opportunity to take revenge against his perverted brother Amnon. Then he invites him to a party, he got him drunk, and he attacks Amnon and he kills him in the presence of all of the rest of his brothers. And his plan was to do it in front of his father David as well. But then, to avoid judgment, he goes on the run. He goes to his grandfather in a place called Geshur, and slowly, after another 3 years, him and others, Joab, begin to devise a plan so he can come home and so he can live in his own house without any consequences for what he's done. No consequences, no repentance, and no sorrow. 2 Samuel 14:28 tells us this. He lives in Jerusalem then for 2 years, but he did not see his father's face. Verse 7 tells us that after another 4 years, his ultimate plan of treachery comes into play. So in total, this man has waited 11 years. 11 years from his sister being raped and King David's failure to act. Absalom then decides that after 11 years, he is going to do a better job than David. He was going to do a better job at administering justice to the people of Israel. This man is one spiteful, devious, deep-minded character. Just to go off script for 1 second. When we look at the life and story of King David, we see a lot of comparisons in Jesus and in the Antichrist. When you look at Samuel, you see characteristics similar to Jesus. When you look at David, you see characteristics similar to Jesus. When you look at Saul, you see characteristics similar to the Antichrist. When you look at Absalom, his name means the father of peace. Again, you see characteristics similar to the Antichrist. When you see Goliath, you find out in 1 Samuel chapter 17, let me get there really quickly, that 666 is even mentioned in the life of Goliath. In verse 4 it says there was a champion who came out of the armies of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had a bronze helmet, and he had scale armor, and he had greaves, and he had a javelin, and he had a spear, and he had a shield carrier, 6 pieces of armor. Then it says that his spear weighed 600 shekels. So you see 666 automatically identified with Goliath. So you can see straight away that although we're learning about the past, it has great significance on the future. And when we come to Absalom, Absalom is a perfect type of the Antichrist. He's the kind of person that once you cross him, you have to be on your guard. You have to sleep with one eye open, because it might take him 1, 2, or even 11 years, but be sure you will get what's coming. As we consider this today, I truly believe that we see this kind of spirit, or the same kind of attitude heavy at work in many people who are just like Absalom. This attitude is rife among the people of the world today. I think it's safe to say that there's many Absaloms about. But the saddest truth of all is this, that they're not only in the world, there's plenty of them in the church. So as we look at this man, and we look at this characteristics of this man, I'm going to examine 4 tactics which Absalom used in order to gain position and to gain power and to come against his father. Let's just, for fun's sake, let's just call it the ABCs of Christianity, okay? Of Christianity, of treachery. A stands for attention. These people are attention seekers. B stands for busy. These people are busybodies and they're always concerned about everybody else's business. C stands for charm, because these people are extremely charming and very, very, very well equipped with flattery. And D stands for deception, because all in all, these people are expert liars. So let's have a look at the first one. One thing that Absalom always enjoyed was the limelight. Absalom is a number 1 attention seeker. In 2 Samuel 14 verse 25, it says this, "Now in all of Israel there was no one as handsome as Absalom, so highly praised, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no defect in him." He was always the center of attention. He loved to be relevant. He loved to be noticed. He loved to be adored. In chapter 14, while living back in Jerusalem, the Bible tells us that he set his cousin Joab's field on fire because he felt as if he was being ignored. Like a spoiled child, he acted out because nobody cared about him. These kind of people like Absalom, they're the kind of people who love to have their name on everybody else's lips. They always want to draw attention to themselves, and they don't care who they have to damage or what they have to damage in order to get that kind of attention that they crave. They'll happily damage property. They'll happily damage reputation. Even someone else's life. They'll damage the church. They'll damage the ministers. They'll damage anybody and everybody. And they always have a good excuse and a good reason for why they act in the way in which they do. Listen, if we're truthful, I don't think anybody would have blamed Absalom for killing his perverted brother Amnon. I think the majority of people would have sided with Absalom on this. Right thing for him. He deserved it. But nevertheless, we should never let our opinions and feelings determine whether or not we should follow God's word. Amen? Remember, good ideas are not always God's ideas. Even when he was questioned about burning Joab's field, his excuse was, I'd be better off dead. Let me see the king. I want to see his face. If not, why did he bring me here? I wish to God I was dead. If there was iniquity inside of me, let him kill me there and then. I'm willing to die just to be in right relationship with Daddy. Poor little Absalom. All he wanted was his daddy to love him again. The truth is this, that these kind of people, they all have a violin story. They thrive off sympathy. Their number one desire is to be loved. But you know what the problem is? They don't love in return. I love me. I just want you to love me as well. That's the attitude. The only reason why he wanted David's love was so that he could use David's love to manipulate David in order to take everything that David had. His throne and even his life. We see these kind of people all the time coming into the churches. They're always suicidal. They've always got a sob story. Pity me. I'm depressed. And whenever they're called out because of their actions, they always have a reason for why they act in which they do. But the truth is this. They're only looking to use your emotions and feelings against you to get what they want. And usually, the sad truth is, they're very convincing, aren't they? Great speakers. Fantastic actors. So verse 1 tells us this. In 2 Samuel chapter 15. Absalom begins to resort back to old tactics. Now it came about, after this, Absalom provided for himself a chariot and the horses and 50 men as runners before him. Imagine the scene for a second. Everyone's talking about what's gone on in the palace anyway. Absalom has been brought back. He's now in relationship with his father. Everything's been restored. All has been forgiven. Imagine the scene that this must have been. This is the best looking man that ever graced the streets of Jerusalem. Big, proud, handsome Prince Absalom. He's now cruising through Jerusalem in a big chariot with a gang of 50 men leading the way, just making his presence known. One scholar wrote this. He said that this was probably the first time that a chariot was ever seen in the walls of Jerusalem being driven by an Israelite. Chariots are always been mentioned in the Bible, but every time they're mentioned, and I had to fact check this and it proved out to be true, every time chariots are mentioned in the Bible, it's always the enemies of God driving chariots and using the chariots to attack the people of God. I was reading in the National Geographic that the first people to invent chariots, especially for warfare, were the Hittites. Who was Uriah? The man who David killed and took his wife. Who was he? He was Uriah the Hittite, wasn't he? It's a very good chance that Absalom in his big grand entrance had a double meaning. It's my opinion that this was more than just promoting himself. He was also very discreetly reminding the people of David's sin against Uriah the Hittite. I think it's no wonder that David wrote this later on in his life in Psalm 20 verse 7. Some boast in chariots and some boast in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord our God. This is something I'm sure we've all noticed when we've seen in the past, and have at some point we probably even experienced these kind of people. Usually they like to promote themselves by pointing to everybody else's faults. There's no limit to what they'll say, and there's no restriction to who they'll talk about in order to build a platform so everyone can look at them and everyone can honor them. In order to elevate themselves, they will rip anybody down. Pastor Colin Smith says this: the way of the world never changes. Find a way to attract attention to yourself, make an impression, build your platform, gain a following. And this is exactly what Absalom's doing. So now he has everybody's attention and all eyes are on him. He's now once again in public view. It's now time to put the second part of his plan into action. It's time to get busy. One thing that you'll always find about people like Absalom is that they're very meticulous. You know what the word meticulous means? It means they pay careful attention to detail. They will pick up on everything. They're very precise and they're extremely involved. As the people of God, we should be involved, shouldn't we? We want to be involved in people's lives. We want to be involved with our brothers and sisters. We want to help counsel them. We want to see them grow in times of need rather than shrinking back. But our involvement in the lives and affairs of people should only be for their benefit, not ours. But you see so many people, they want to know all about you. They want to know about your weaknesses. They want to know about your sins. They want to know about your failures in order to use that as ammunition against you. A few years back, we had a fellow come into our church, very strange fella, and he kept going around to all the brothers in the church. What do you struggle with? Tell me and I'll pray for you. What sins do you have? Tell me and I'll pray for you. Little small fella, little small fat dude. And he come to me and he said, Francie, I can ask you a question, yeah. What do you struggle with? I said, small fat men asking me stupid questions. I just cut him down there and then. I knew exactly what he was getting to, but I had to warn the brothers about him also. But these people, they want to know everything. They want to know all about your life because they want to use that against you in the future. Once Absalom has his platform, Absalom is beginning to get involved in people's lives. But the truth is, he has no interest in them whatsoever. His only interest is in himself. He's only interested in him. In verse 2 it says, Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way of the gate. And when a man who had a suit would come to the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, from what city are you? And he would say, your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel. Then Absalom would say to him, see, your claims are good. They're right, but no man listens to you in part of the king. This man seems very sympathetic. He seems very caring. He seems very loving. He's putting himself out there for the people. But the truth is, he's only using the people's weaknesses and vulnerability against them. At this time, if a dispute couldn't be settled locally, what the people would do is, they would hop on their cart, or they'd hop on their horse or their animal or whatever, and they would go to the king for matters. So they would come from all around of Israel, hard journeys. So whenever a man come to the king, it was always for a serious matter. And the king would usually act as the supreme lawgiver and judge. But before the people could reach the king, Absalom has positioned himself in the gate, him and a group of his followers. He's already famous, everyone knew who he was, but the most impressive thing was, he was available. Look at that. Absalom. Big, tall, handsome, good-looking man, the king's son. And he's here listening to me and to my problems. Who am I that a prince would listen to me? Imagine how flattering that must have been. You didn't have to make the journey into the palace. You had a royal coming out meeting you, wanting to know what was going on in your life. How special must these poor gullible people have felt that someone so high up and someone so important would take time for people like us. This was false humility. False humility in its truest form. He was pretending to be humble. He was pretending to be careful. He was pretending to be interested. Well, at the whole time, all that these people were was a means to an end. These kind of people don't care about you. They don't care where you're from. They don't care what your complaints are. These kind of people are only bothered about what you can do for them. They don't care about who you are. They don't care about you. And do you know how do you know they don't care about you? Already we've established this, that the true man of God will always correct you in your sin. Yeah? Amen? Right? So if you've got a problem, and if it's right or wrong, you can expect a true man of God to say to you, well, no, I believe you're right, or I believe you're wrong. There's men in this room right now, right here, who have corrected me times in my life. I've rung them up. I said, what do you reckon about this? They said, Francie, you're wrong. Okay. Why? Because they were honest. They weren't just men pleasers. They weren't giving me what I wanted to hear, but they were telling me what I needed to hear. When these people were coming to Absalom, he was saying, your case is good. You're 100%. I believe you. I'm there for you. But I can't do nothing about it. I wish I could. Do you know, if I was a judge, I'd give you justice. No, the king hasn't sent nobody to listen to you. The king's not interested in you. But if I was the king, it'd be a different story. But there you go. Do you know the pastor of this church? He doesn't care about you. All he's doing is always telling you off. He's always correcting you. I think you're right. I think he's wrong. Do you know, if I was the minister in this church, if I was the spiritual authority in your life, I'd give you justice. There's always a campaign against rebellious people to destroy the leadership that God puts in place. Proverbs 27 verse 6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. Every complaint that come against him, he agreed with them. He'd say, you're right. 100%. I agree. He didn't tell them what they wanted to hear, what they needed to hear. He only told them what they wanted to hear. In verse 3, it says he would say to them, your claims are good, but nobody else is interested, only me. These people are politicians. They agree with everybody. They have a face for everybody. They're willing to help everybody. At the same time, they're slandering and they're ripping down genuine brothers and sisters in the Lord, the ones who would actually give you good godly advice. When you're right, they tell you you're right. When you're wrong, they tell you you're wrong. While agreeing with everybody, he was slandering the king. He was causing the people to lose confidence in the leadership. I believe you. I agree 100%. He won't in there. He's not even interested. Hasn't sent nobody out. He criticized and he spoke about King David while promoting himself. We need to be very, very careful of these kinds of people. People who secretly criticize and they throw little subliminal hints to speak about other people who are in positions that they want to be in. If a person can't confront sin head on, if he can't confront wrongdoing head on, but all he can do is whisper about other people, be sure of this, the motives of their heart is not pure. Whenever you hear it, don't say you heard this from me. What I usually do is, hey, your man just told me. I exposed him straight away. But I think the question is why? Why was he allowed to make such a spectacle for 4 years? 4 years he was at it. 4 years. He had a long-term plan. Why wasn't he confronted by David or his trusted followers? And maybe at this time, I believe David was very sick. He was suffering from a long illness that prevented him from fulfilling his normal duties. At the end of the first book of Psalms, and there are several books in the book of Psalms, from Psalm 35 to 41, they all seem to relate to this period in David's life. Psalm 37 says, it's especially interesting, it reminds us of this kind of period in David's life when he says, I have been young, but now I'm old. He's old and he's weary. 2 Samuel 37:25, it says David died at the age of 70. At the time of Absalom's rebellion, he probably would have been in the last 10 years of his life. So this could have been a period of a long illness that wouldn't have been a surprise at this point. Psalm 41, when David wrote this, he's clearly relating to the time of Absalom's rebellion. David describes the man who was blessed of the Lord. He said, the Lord protects him and keeps him alive. You do not give him up to the will of his enemies. The Lord sustains him on his sickbed, and in his illness you will restore him to full strength. More than likely, David was very sick and he couldn't get out to meet the people. And that's why Absalom was able to go unchecked for 4 years. David describes some of these people who come to visit him during his illness. They were visitors who uttered empty words when they came, but they fell into Absalom's trap, and they spread false rumors when he left. More than likely, the people who were coming into King David, they had position, they were generals, and they were somebody important. But now they know the king's going to die. He's sick, he's old. What we need to do is we need to get on the right side of Absalom, because he's the best candidate for the job. In Psalm 41 verse 6, David says this: "When he comes to see me, he speaks falsehood. His heart gathers wickedness to itself. When he goes outside, he tells it. All who hate me whisper together against me. Against me they devise my hurt, saying a wicked thing is poured out upon him, that when he lies down, he will not rise up again." So more than likely, David is sick. He can't perform his duties, and the people who are going in to see him know he's going to die, or they think he's not going to recover. See, this is exactly how gossip works. People hear it, then eventually they believe it, and before you know it, there's no hope for the person who's been talked about. They come in, they use empty words, they flatter him. When they leave, they say, "He's finished, he's done, he's toast. This is the end of him." And everyone began to believe it, and everyone began to despair, and everyone's beginning to think about their own futures. And what you'll find in times of desperation, when the rubber hits the road, that's when you know who your true friends are. David had gathered around himself people who weren't truly his friends, but only people who were interested in position. And when he could no longer offer him position, they were looking for the next best thing. And who was the next best thing? Absalom. Absalom plays this to his own advantage. You have a really good case, but I'm sorry to tell you that the king's in bad shape. Nobody's here to hear you. And all of a sudden, Absalom delivers the punchline. Moreover, Absalom would say that if one would appoint me judge in the land, any man who has a suit or a case, I would come and give him justice. If you only come to me, if only I had the power, I have everything that you need. Not some man dying on a sick bed who's full of sin. We know what he's done. We're no strangers to all of his mishaps. But me, if you would put me in position, I could give you a better life. I could plead your case. I could give you justice. The old system's broken. You need someone here and now. You need someone involved, young, who's interested, someone who cares for you, someone who wants to know your problems, who wants to hear your problems. I know the man. Me. There you go, problem solved. One thing that always comes out in the wash in these kinds of people, they're always the person who has the answers to all of your problems. Godly people point people of God to the words of God. Amen? We've already established that today, haven't we? Godly people will always bring you to the Word of God. They will always tell you what the Bible says. These people are only interested in what they can say, and who people listen to them over than the Word of God. These worldly, cold-hearted, callous, deceitful men, they're not interested in God. They're not interested in pointing God's people to His Word. They're only interested in pointing the people to themselves, because lo and behold, they have all the answers to life. And to reassure you of that, they will run down everybody else. What will help them sell it? How could they be more convincing? What would give you that extra push in the right direction to believe them above everybody else? Brings us to our next point. Charm. The third letter in the alphabet stands for charm, or flattery. 2 Samuel 15 verse 5 says, "When a man come near to prostrate himself," that means to bow himself down, "he would take out his hand and take a hold of him and kiss him. And in this manner Absalom dealt with all of Israel, who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole away the hearts of the men of Israel." Hugs and kisses for everybody, except for King David. Imagine how these people must have felt. They've traveled the length and the breadth of the land. They're probably exhausted. They're tired. They're disappointed. They couldn't get an audience with David. And in their own mind, they're probably cursing David. My 7 curses to David. Come all the way here and he's nowhere to be seen. But then all of a sudden, a big, tall, handsome man, a loving man, an affectionate man, a caring man, the most caring man of all of Israel, has all the answers to their problems. Not only that, he's incredibly humble. He's not too high or mighty to listen to the common people. He won't even let you bow down in front of him. He picks them up and he honors them with a kiss. These people are probably thinking, looking at Absalom, this man is a man no different than us. He's the man that we need. These kind of people, they have a very humble appearance, but inwardly they're full of the highest pride. Their humility, their humble appearance is only a costume. Their humble character is only a mask. They don't think they're on the same level as the people around them. Instead, they think that you're a fool and you can be fooled by a hug and a kiss. Not everybody who sends you a love heart in a WhatsApp message is your friend. That's the sad truth. Not everybody who wants to know what you're doing and where you are is your friend and loves you. Not everybody who agrees with everything you have to say is your friend. You need to be very, very careful of people. Why? Because people are always looking to deceive, sadly, in the church, everyone around them, because they want what everybody else has. They want your undivided attention so they can rule the roost. Proverbs 26 verse 24 says this, He who hates disguises his lips, but he lays up in his heart deceit. For when he speaks graciously, do not believe him, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Though his hatred covers itself with guile, his wickedness will be revealed before the assembly. This is only a masquerade. They can only keep it up for a period of time, but eventually their true colours will be shown, and who they really are will always rise to the surface. After hearing many testimonies and after counselling many people, especially in our own church, I think one of the most devastating things that happens in the church, in the life of a believer, is when they find out that they've been fooled or they've been used by a person who they loved and trusted. Have you ever been there? Have you ever laid it bare before someone and you trust them so much and you think that they're a good brother or they're a good sister and you let your guard down? And in the world we don't usually let our guard down, do we? We don't want to be foolish. We don't want to be soppy. We don't want to tell people what's going on in our lives and our faults and our failures and our good and our bad. So we keep our guard up. But when we come to church, we think everyone's like-minded. We think everyone has the mind of Christ. So we let our guard down. And we begin to let people into our lives, strangers, and we begin to tell them personal things, hoping that they're going to pray for us and take care of us. And instead, they use what information they have against you in order to destroy you. That can be one of the most hurtful things that can ever happen in the life of a believer. Why? Because you feel stupid. How in the name of God did I let these people, these strangers, into my life to know what I was thinking, to know what I was doing? How could I have been so foolish? It's not that you were wrong. Your heart was right. It's that these deceitful people were wrong. All of their friendship and all of their hugs and kisses and all of their counsel and care and support was all one big lie, and they used it to secure their own position. This will bring us to our final point of the night in our alphabet of treachery. D stands for deception. When we consider all of this, we think to ourselves, how could people keep up this act for so long? How could we who are sensible people, level-headed people, fall for such treachery? The truth is we fall for it all the time because we're always looking for the best in people. We don't want to see people for who they are and for their ugly selves. We want to think that people are doing right by God and people are doing right by the church. So we let our guard down and we hope for the best and we wish for the best and we look for the best. But sadly, not everybody who hugs you and smiles into your face and asks you how your day is really interested at all. Some people are expert liars, and they would lie to anyone and everyone to achieve their goal. And I think the truth is that they even lie to themselves. They're trying to convince themselves that they're doing right. The Bible says that wicked men will go on deceiving and being deceived. They're full of self-deceit. They are self-deceived. They take the moral high ground. They put on this humble appearance and they criticize the ministers. They criticize the eldership. They criticize other Christians. They point to everybody else's failure. because they've deceived themselves into thinking that they're better than everybody else. They're deceiving themselves into thinking that they actually care for you and love you when they don't. And what's worse, these kind of people will even use the name of God in order to convince you of their lies. 2 Samuel 15 verse 7 says this: Now it came about in the end of 4 years that Absalom said to the king, Please let me go and pay my vow which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I was living in Geshur in Aram, saying, If the Lord shall indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said to him, Go in peace. And he arose and he went to Hebron. Now that Absalom has once again established his popularity and he's stolen the hearts of the people, he now has enough support while King David is absent. And it's now time to bring his plan into fruition. It's now time to seize power and to get his throne and to get his position of power. But again, it's all done by deception. He makes up a story to his father and he tells him, he says, Look, while I was away in Geshur, I said to the Lord, if you bring me back to Jerusalem, I'll worship you. That's enough to tell you about that kind of person. A man who makes deals with gods. God, if you do this for me, then I'll do this for you. What kind of person in here can bring anything to the table in making a deal with God? None. Whenever King David was being disciplined for his sin, he said, if the Lord has called Shimei to curse David, let him curse David. When he numbered the men of Israel and God said, look, what do you want me to do? Shall I give you into the hands of your enemies? Should I punish you? Should I send a plague? He said, Lord, you do what you see best. Send a plague, because I'd much rather be punished by you for my sin than by the world. He was always willing to submit to God's discipline. This fella says, Lord, if you bring me back to Jerusalem, if you do for me, I'll do for you. You scratch my back, God, and I'll scratch yours. I will be a Christian. And I will go to church, and I will worship God if He gives me X, Y, and Z. Have you ever heard that before? Truthfully. We hear it all the time. It's Absalom's world. It's all about him. And not the people who trust in him, nor his family, who love him, or even God is going to stop him from getting what he wants. How many people do you know like that? How many people will twist stories and even scriptures to get what they want? They look genuine, they look down to earth, they look real, but in reality they're completely fake. The only thing real about them is that they're real frauds. Sadly, King David does what so many people do with these kinds of people. Once again, rather than correcting him, maybe he was too harsh on him last time. Rather than discipline him, rather than stopping him in his tracks, he says, Go on then, Absalom. Have a nice time. If you want to go, go. Carry on. Crack on. Maybe he was too sick and he couldn't be bothered with the hassle. Maybe he had a soft spot for Absalom because he longed for him while he was in Geshur. We even know that David knows exactly what kind of person Absalom is. He's a ruthless person. So why did David allow him to go? Do you know, sometimes we think that we're saving a problem by just submitting to it and brushing it under the carpet. But if we, the people of God, don't stand up to this kind of person and to these kind of people, then sadly our silence becomes compliance. By not addressing these problems, we're not saving problems, but in the future we're creating problems. We create our own monsters. We need to correct people in the Word of God. We need to say, no, this is right and that's wrong. And this is the route we're going to take. We need to be aware. We can't be so soppy and so gullible, so vulnerable at all times. The Bible says we're to stand firm in the faith. In 1 Corinthians chapter 16 it says, stand firm and act like men. Don't be gullible, don't be childish. Realize that we live in a real world. Realize that there's real people who come into the Church of Jesus Christ and their only plan is to destroy it. They want to destroy the ministers. They want to talk about the ministers' wives. They want to talk about the people around them. They want you to lose all of your confidence in the leadership, and they want you to put all of your confidence in them. But the reason why they're not in position in the first place is because they haven't been called by God to be there. Why? Because like God knew David's heart, He also knows their heart. Second Samuel 15 verse 10 says this, But Absalom sent spies throughout all of the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom is king in Hebron. Then 200 men went with Absalom from Jerusalem, who were invited, and innocently, they did not know anything. They were fooled once again. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gileonite, David's counselor, from the city of Gilo. And he was offering sacrifices, and the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. Do you know what birds of a feather do? They flock together. Absalom is a corrupt, evil, wicked, bitter man. So the first thing that he does is he goes in search for another man just like him. Ahithophel was David's counselor. He was Bathsheba's grandfather. But all in all, he held bitterness against David for 20 odd years, and he wanted his revenge for what happened to Uriah the Hittite. These kind of people, they'll always seek after the same kind of people as themselves, and bitterness is contagious. Make no mistake, if you hang around with a bitter person, soon you will become bitter. If you hang around with a backbiter, soon you will find yourself backbiting. If you hang around with ungodly people, the Bible says have nothing to do with ungodly conversations, for those who engage in them become more and more ungodly. If you hang around with a person who's got a problem with the leadership of your church, pretty soon, before you know it, you also will have a problem with the leadership of your church. You begin to look at people through a microscopic glass, and you want to highlight every little thing that they do. And pick out stupid faults. Did you hear what he said? Did you hear what she said? Did you hear what he done? Look at her. Look at the way she's dressed. Look what he done. That's not godly. A real minister wouldn't do that. A real pastor wouldn't do that. Pastor's wife wouldn't do that. A real Christian wouldn't do that. They got problems with everybody and everything. Top and bottom of the story is they have a problem with themselves. At the end of it all, and we're going to close now, after Absalom tries to come against David and kill his own father, in 2 Samuel chapter 18, he suffers the just punishment. It says, Now Absalom happened to meet the servants of David, for Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak, and his head caught fast in the oak, so he was left hanging between heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him kept going. So here's this handsome man, and he used to cut his hair and weigh his hair. That's how thick his hair was. All of a sudden, he is now hanging from the trees between heaven and earth by his hair. His own glory, his own pride was his own downfall. He prided himself on how good looking he was, how intelligent he was, how valiant he was, how he used to weigh his own hair. He'd cut off his hair and he'd weigh it because it was so thick. The very thing that he took pride in the most was the thing that had him suspended between heaven and earth. I've already said to you in the beginning of the meeting that Absalom was a perfect type of the Antichrist. He was a perfect type of a Judas, a betrayer. Do you know, there's only two people apart. Listen, Absalom's hanging here not by his own volition. He's hanging here by accident. But there's only two people in the whole Bible who actually commit suicide by hanging. One is Judas Iscariot, and one is Absalom's partner in crime, Ahithophel. The Bible says wicked men run even when no one's following. I hope tonight that I'm not speaking about you. I want to alert you to these kind of people. I hope you've learned a lot about the Bible. I hope you learned a lot about these characters. I hope you've learned a lot about yourself. But I hope for your sake that you are not this kind of person. If you are, there's no better time than now to repent. Let's pray. Heavenly Father,